And hopefully you can apply it to make a really successful project because you're time limited, right? And there's a lot of times where that's the reality of things. You have a short time to deliver a big or potentially small feature. And then again, at least half the time, hopefully, at least half the time for discussion. Now, if any of this seems like weird or you're not really sure why it's there, let me know at the discussion so that I can make sure to get in the content that you actually wanted during that portion. I talk fast, so again, do not hesitate to interrupt. So a little background about me. When I was in college, I went to the wonderful FIU, which is why I'm here now. I was born and raised in Miami, Florida, so I lived my whole life there. I was very involved in the hackathon culture with, as you can see, kind of repeating faces, some of the same group of friends, but I also tried to do volunteer work and just different job opportunities that exposed me to a tremendous group of people. I never liked hanging out with just the same people over and over again because I got like a closed mindset. And I realized the more I expanded my network, the more I tried to interact with different groups that had really powerful morals and growth sets, I was growing too. So examples of this, I don't know what it's called now, so I apologize, but it was like CS First, where you went to teach like elementary school and middle school kids how to code. So I did that like my freshman and sophomore year, which is really good when you're looking for internship experience, but you don't have the technical strength. I also did TA work. I joined UPE and I helped a lot out with like ASI when they did like the resume reviews and just every other opportunity that you all know UPE has a million of. So I tried to just involve myself in everything. I didn't care at what cost. I was never home. It was just so much fun for me to kind of dive headfirst. So that's a little bit about my background. So after graduation, I just couldn't get enough of FIU, so I came back like immediately. But basically, I graduated and then I came back for the last Shell Hacks with Microsoft, since Microsoft helped sponsor. It was so amazing. Hopefully, I spoke to a few of you. I tried really hard to focus on like resumes. I'm all about mentoring and giving back to the community, especially FIU. So if you find me on LinkedIn, just let me know, hey, I'm an FIU student, saw your talk. Let's connect and let's do it. I'm more than happy to chat almost anytime. I'll let you know if I'm busy, but I mentor at least 5 to 6 FIU students since my graduation. So for the past 2 years, I've mentored about 10, 15 people. And it's something I take so much pride in. And if I don't have the bandwidth or the right skill set for the mentor you're looking for, there are many other FIU alums that they don't know how to reach out to you guys, but they want to mentor you. If you told them like, I want to hear you talk, they're all going to be like, oh, do I have things to say? So please, let me be that bridge. If you're looking for an industry mentor, I can help you find that, guaranteed, even if it's not my area. There's a lot more that I did. I did a bunch of internships in software engineering. I did a research internships and full-time at research for a couple months. I did it in the space of AI and ML. I also did like database work and data analyst work. So I have a lot of mixed internship background. So I've kind of touched everything. And I landed at Microsoft as a program manager simply because I didn't know at my past software engineering internships, I didn't know what difference I was making. So I was coding all of these things that were saving companies millions of dollars, actually. Like I was doing effective work and that was beautiful. It's rewarding, but I'm a very like giving back person. Like I told you, I love community and I wasn't getting that. I didn't know how I was helping any community. I wasn't bettering anyone's quality of life or helping anyone. So I was kind of like stuck between, is this something I'm passionate about? Which is why I went into research to see if I could develop something new to help folks. And then I interviewed just kind of randomly for a PM job at Microsoft. It was kind of like something I wanted, but I wasn't sure. It kind of depended on the interview, and I did it, and I was still not sure, but I took it, and it changed my life. It really did. This role is something that really opened my eyes. I was afraid I wouldn't be technical enough or too technical. I was very worried, but I can see the difference it's making in so many people's workflows, and Microsoft gives you opportunities outside of your singular work to also expand community. So it's really beautiful. And now I get to, with Microsoft, come back to you guys and talk to you guys about my experience. So that's a plus. So that's enough about me. Hopefully I didn't take too long, but I apologize for rambling at you guys. So let's get into like the meat of the content. And this is where I say again, if you need a clarification on anything, I will glance at the chat. Yes, I just saw that. Yes, I was the UP Mentor FIU director, which is why I'm so passionate about mentorship. Pushing that again, mentorship. So we're gonna jump into the meat of this. If you need clarification, jump in, caps it so that I can see. the words, like say, hey, what does this mean? Or just what, and I'll look. Feel free to unmute yourself too. So let's talk a little bit about what a product manager is. So you're probably going to hear a lot of variations of project, program, product, just PM used, right? One definition for all of them is kind of insane. It doesn't exist. So what I'm going to talk about here are usually the key qualities and the key responsibilities that someone who is a technical product manager will take on. Microsoft will use the term program manager. That is equivalent to another company's product manager. Excuse me. So first thing we do is we develop the product strategy. This means we need to develop a vision for a product. You can have a bunch of engineers, very qualified, amazing, build a beautiful product, but they're going to start building just to build. They don't know where they're going. They don't know who they're trying to target. They don't know how to sell it or what competitors are doing. They don't have time to do all of that when they're developing really complex architectures. So when you don't have a vision, you don't know where you're going to end, and you don't know if that's where you actually want to end. So it requires a lot of strategy. You need to think 15 steps ahead, always. That's just part of the job. And it's part of the complexity that makes it fun. It's hard, but it's really rewarding. The next part that kind of comes hand in hand with that is developing the product roadmap. So once you know the strategy, like I want to, really dig into this developer community, like that is our goal for 2020. In 2020, I want to get the whole developer community on our side for this product. Okay, well, how are we going to do that? Well, developers love open source. So, that's an initiative we need to take. So for, let's say in August, I want to two integrations with two major open source services right now. Okay, well, or libraries. So there we go. That's your product roadmap. And you're kind of defining when they're going to happen. Exactly when is not so important so much as this planning semester. So this next year, 6 months, these are the features or functionalities that need to go out for us to get closer to that vision or that strategy that we agreed on. The next part, and they're all equally important, but this one holds a lot of value, and I would argue is the most important, which is engaging with customers, because what happens a lot of times is we end back at that, when you get PMs that are technical, right? What's going to happen is you guys are going to tend towards engineering. You guys are going to build all this engineering stuff, wonderful. You're going to think you know what you want because you did competitive analysis and you see what others are doing. But then you hear customers and they're like, we've tried all these products, but they're not giving us what we want. What we want is just a very simple interface. We don't need all these tweaks and buttons and tunes. We just want something we can use. Well, that's different than what the rest of the market is developing, but it's what our customer base is actually looking for. So it changes our strategy. It changes that development roadmap because what we're building is for a different base than what exists today. So taking time to listen and engage with customers is super important. On average, I will have at least 2 engagements with a customer every week. That's pretty normal. But it depends on the product that you're in. There's some that don't engage with customers because you're not a customer-facing product. It doesn't mean you don't impact customers. This is just something, one way or another, customers add value to how you do your work and should always be considered, right? They're the core of how you design things. The last one is you just become the point of contact for functionality. So I own a couple of projects. Oh, I didn't talk about what I do, I apologize. So I'm a program manager for Azure Machine Learning. So that's part of the AI and machine learning organization. And I work on automated ML. So it's basically like Azure ML and then a subservice of Azure ML's automated ML. It's meant to democratize. So it makes it easier for more folks other than just data scientists to create models and do machine learning. So as part of that, I own a few projects within automated ML. One of them is time series forecasting. So there's different types of machine learning you can do. You can do classification, regression, and a subset of regression is time series forecasting. So just think forecasting sales. That's the easiest way of thinking about it. So I'm the point of contact for anything forecasting in all of Azure Machine Learning. So even if they're not using AutoML, because I have more context on the domain, if they get a customer that they're trying to win over, I will join that call and I'll talk to them about their problem, whether or not it scales to the solutions that we have. Sometimes it's just that they need a little bit of guidance. They're like, well, I have like 20 stores. Like, how do I create forecasts for all 20 stores and still visualize it in a way that makes sense? So that's something we're going to talk about. But these are kinds of the different responsibilities that a typical PM, regardless of company, is going to have. So questions either after during the discussion, post them in the chat. I'm going to pause for a second to drink water. Cool. So I'm going to quickly cover some hackathon essential product development lifecycle steps. There's a lot of different steps in the product lifecycle. You can just Google them to be honest, or Bing them to be honest, or you can watch some YouTube videos. Happy to talk about it in the discussion. But I just want you guys to be really successful in your hackathons, because that's really where you learn, where you get firsthand experience. Unless you're doing an internship, in which case we can talk offline and talk about the whole life cycle. I just want to hit home with like what you actually need to be successful. She really betrayed Microsoft. I'm sorry. So hackathon essentials. Number one, define your objective. You have to know what you're aiming for before you start building. So please, if the first thing you do is just open a computer and start looking, oh, am I going to use Azure? Am I going to use AWS? You're doing it wrong. No. First thing you should do is define an objective. The next thing is you're going to define key success metrics. And I know it's a fancy word, success metrics. Don't get caught up on that. Really what it is you're trying to define the value. So what is it like when you're pitching this, to a bunch of people? What is it that's really going to bring it home? What are the things that you actually trying to make a difference in? And the last one is how you pitch those values. So we're going to jump into each one of these and talk about how you guys can have a little bit of an easier time with them. So the first one is defining the objectives. There's a couple of do's and don'ts. And I have seen this as, both a hackathon goer and a hackathon judge. The first don't is don't overcomplicate. I don't need you to solve like world hunger. Like relax. It's wonderful. I love the ambition, but it's 24 hours, potentially 36 hours. You're not going to solve it all. Just start with a small problem or a small stepping stone towards a larger goal. Like this is my small goal in hopes that it'll be this big thing later. Sure. Let's start with that small goal. So also avoid making reaching assumptions. Like everybody wants an app that tells them, what the perfect outfit for summer is. Where are you getting that information? Like, how did you find that that was accurate? Is there any source of truth? Is there even a Medium article? Is there a New York Times study? Is there some kind of research? Is there a trend that you see? Oh, number one, even if it's social media, number one trending on TikTok or Instagram is Kylie Jenner. So everybody wants a Kylie Jenner product. Okay, it's not reaching. It's a little much, but it's not reaching. At least you have some kind of data to back it up, and it adds a little bit of storyline, which we're going to talk about when we get to the pitch. So when you're defining the objective, make sure that you're backing it up with those metrics that we kind of talked about. So no reaching assumptions. Everything should be based off something you have some kind of data on. The do are keep it clear and concise. The easier it is for most people to understand, the easier it's going to be for you to pitch. I'm just going to be honest, especially on a short notice. You're going to get people with a lot of different backgrounds, and they're not always going to be very niche to you. So like if you're doing a deep machine learning or AI project and your judges are going to be deeply technical, that's fine. But usually at a hackathon, you get quite a mix. So make sure you have a very high level demo. And if you understand the roots or the architecture, if someone technical comes around, then you show that. But don't start with that. You're not impressing anyone. You're rather confusing them. Trust me. So we do want to keep it clear and concise. We want to base it off customer workflow. So right now, people have to walk 10 miles to get to work, but with this transportation tool, they can only walk, 2, because it lets them jump 20 miles. I don't know. So basically show them how it's hard right now and how you're making it easier. And then more data and insights. So that's defining the objective. What I'm going to do is quickly walk through a scenario that I had at work and how I applied like a very simple objective in this case. So let's say we have, and this goes back to my job, we have a service that takes in historical sales data. And don't let me lose you guys, this one's short. So we have a service that takes in historical sales data. So let's say public sales for chicken tender subs for 2 stores. So, or let's say 10 stores. So 10 stores across Florida, 10 public stores across Florida. And we want to know how they're selling their chicken tender subs, which is the thing I miss the most about Florida. And so I feed in this historic data for maybe the past 3 years. So I see how sales were doing the last 3 years. And now I can retrieve and I say, I want the next month of sales. So I gave you 3 years of historic data, tell me the next month of sales. Well, then automated ML will generate a model and you can go ahead and deploy the model. And what that does is just create a REST endpoint so that you can hit the REST endpoint and get out your predictions. So if you know anything about APIs, which is fine if you don't, but if you know anything about APIs, this requires code. You're going to have to use some kind of code or Postman or some technical equipment, let's just say, in order to get predictions from this model. Little bit of preface is you can train this model with 0 code. So that means we have a cliff between folks who don't need code to folks who do need code. immediately after you train a model, you need code. So we don't have a no code end-to-end workflow. So anyone we're trying to attract, when we said we were democratizing and making ML easy for everyone, well, it's easy until you need to use a model. Then you need someone who has more knowledge. So we kind of have a cliff here. And my company said, you know, traditionally we targeted data scientist personas, but since we introduced time series forecasting, we're seeing that we're attracting data analysts, we're attracting folks in the financial sector. So it's not so much data analysts or data scientists anymore. It's not so much developers. It's kind of like a hybrid of folks who maybe know a little bit of code, but aren't super comfortable. And now we're telling them, hey, we're going to give you a forecast, but you have to interact with this model and write code to get anything out of it. So it's kind of like we're losing half our customer base, and we can see that. We're hearing direct feedback. We're seeing all the trending that we expected to happen, positive trend that we expected to happen from finance, and getting like, you know, kind of these less technical and the data scientist realm personas started to actually stabilize. It was kind of the same. We didn't see growth. There was a little bit of decline some places, but it was more or less the same. We're kind of like, well, what's stopping them? And the truth is that they just didn't need code. They needed two solutions, and I'm going to talk about one here. One is they needed the ability to just get their predictions from that UI experience, that no code experience, just a download button that gave them predictions in Excel. They don't want to interact with the REST endpoint. They don't know what the heck that is. The second thing is they want to be able to visualize. When we say forecast, the first thing that comes into our head is like the stock market visuals, right? We want to know what it looks like. Don't make us work for it. Just give it to us. So that's what we're going to focus on. My objective is to give users the ability to visualize their forecast without coding. That's what I want to do. Super simple. Anyone that reads this, they might have questions on like how or why, but they don't have questions on what I'm trying to do. What I'm trying to do is simple. It's a forecast. That's it. No code. So then we have to talk about some of the key success metrics. So I've defined my hackathon project. Let's say forecast with no code. And the next thing is metrics. And how you should think about this kind of comes back. I kind of said the metrics as I went along, but now we're just going to kind of name them and then understand why they're important. So I've done this personally where I started a hackathon project and I'm like, oh my God, I'm so excited. I want to do A, B, C. We're going to make it beautiful. We're going to add like cool text and visuals. It's going to be awesome. But then the problem is that I lose out on prioritization. I'm not thinking about what's actually important to make the minimal viable product for a hackathon. Instead, I want to load it up with all the cool stuff and wow the judges when I haven't actually built anything, right? It's more of a PowerPoint than an actual product. So it's tempting. It's very tempting to say you want to make the coolest thing ever in 24 hours instead of making something good that you're proud of and can build off in the future. So any metrics you choose should help you decide, is this important or is this not? An example. So if I want to do visualizations for forecasts and have 10 stores, what if a user only wants to see forecasts for stores 2, 5, and 8? Because those stores tend to act the same. So they kind of want to see how they're performing. Now, that's a good use case, but it isn't a necessity. Like they can still see the 10 forecasts and kind of like visualize, okay, well, that's the third store and the second store. They can kind of do that manually. It's not the best experience, but they're not going to die. They're fine, right? Building forecasts that shows all 10 stores, that is my minimal viable product. That is it. I don't need to add a bunch of filters. I don't need to do super fancy color coding. Not right now. It's okay to phase your work. What you can even do is set 2, no more than 3 milestones. Milestone 1, minimal viable product. Milestone 2, oh, it was really nice to have filtering. So if we finish before the 24-hour mark or before the 20-hour mark, because we want to give reasonable time between, we'll build that second phase, which is adding filtering. So pace yourself. You don't need to do everything at once. That's never going to work. It's going to be more pain than it's worth. What happens is when you're trying to build perfect, someone else is there releasing less than perfect, getting customer feedback, iterating, and building something better. So build something, base, good, send it out. That's your phase 1. Build something else, add it, send it out. That's how it works, and that's how you're going to be the most successful. But how you choose which to send out, when, first, second, it has to be around these success metrics. So that's how you prioritize. And metrics should be a good balance between, customer and data. I don't know how much data will be relevant to some of the projects that you guys are building, but if you can find some data, that would be great. Like, 20% of communities don't have access to internet or something. Well, how is that useful? How can you show that whatever you're building is impactful to that? So some of the metrics that I have here, I've labeled them by qualitative and quantitative. I think it's a good thing to have a mixture of both. It gets a little bit blind when you just lean either way. If you're just quantitative, are you really? But if you're just qualitative, are the numbers really adding up to what you're hearing? So you should use a good mix of both. So qualitative is just customer satisfaction. So talk to those customers who weren't happy with the experience, and then talk to them afterwards and see if anything has changed, if they're like it, or even talk to them during the entire cycle of building it. You can also talk to new customers and see, wow, you know, I'd never considered any ML product, but now that I can see you can visualize forecasts so easily, maybe I'll use this, right? Some quantitative include, do you see usage? So we use compute hours, so hours of how much time you take to train a model. So has that increased, that compute usage, has it increased with our existing customers who are using time series forecasting? That's number one. And if it has, well, hey, maybe we're doing something right. Two is, are we attracting new users? Are we seeing blog posts on Medium? Are we seeing blog posts internally, externally? Do we see new users? Oh, I saw that you have, you know, I want to join you guys because, or like become a customer because I saw this functionality. Are we seeing that? And are like, can you attribute the new usage to this feature? So it's a little bit of manual work, but if you can do that, it's really the most impactful thing you can do. So once you have your metrics for prioritization and for figuring out the value, like what you're trying to drive home, it's going to make the next part of this very, very easy. So I kind of already talked about this. I talked about prioritization, and phasing works with clear milestones. I'm going to pause for 10 seconds to drink water. If you guys have any clarification questions, shoot. Okay. So then the last part is to pitch your product. So pitching your product is actually really, really easy if you follow these steps. Odds are you guys are about halfway through your hackathon, I think. So some of this is just done. It's okay. Let's just focus on what you can do either next time or for the rest of this hackathon. So the first thing is, and this you can still do, is emphasize your objective. Oh, I built a really cool app. It does X, Y, Z. No, I wanted to build an app that helped connect schools, or what are you guys connecting communities, connect communities across whatever that is. I don't know what your project example is, but maybe we can talk about one in the discussion. So emphasize that. In my case, I wanted to build a visualization for forecasts without users having to use code. This makes it easier to democratize forecasting with AutoML and invite more people to use the product. So I gave you 2 sentences and you know exactly, one, what I'm trying to do and the impact. I told you, one, I'm trying to no code visualizations. What is this going to do? Bring me more users. Allow more people. It's going to bring me more users from a company perspective, but from a customer perspective, it's enabling so many folks that couldn't do this previously, couldn't use machine learning because they're in business backgrounds. You know what I'm talking about? They're in finance backgrounds, not in data scientists, not in CS. So we're enabling a whole different set of personas to use this really cool feature. So that's the value. 2 sentences, objective, value. So again, we can use metrics to justify this. Well, you can use metrics to justify why you did it rather than the impact, because that's a little harder for you guys to do in a hackathon. But like I said, you know, 20% of students don't have Wi-Fi. So this was going to impact them, you know, because whatever. The next one is to use a story. So kind of how like I went with Publix chicken tender subs, you know, something that I know we could all relate to. You're going to pick a story or something to go along with your page. You can give your objective, you can give a value, but when you're demoing, say, pretend I'm Sally. You know, Sally owns, I don't know, whatever, 2 stores. And she walks in and she grabs 3 pizzas off an instant ready shelf, right? Well, how do the employees then know when to refill the shelves? What happens if Bob walks in and there's no pizzas left? 1, that's an unhappy customer and you missed out on sales. So by, you know, democratizing who can have access to machine learning models, these pizzeria places can leave with more happy customers, and Sally or whoever owns the store, you know, the store owners can have more sales, they can have more revenue and have happier customers, and overall they grow because of this, right? So you're showing a story of like how they would use your product and why it's important, why it's valuable. It's not just that you said it's valuable, here's a story so I can visualize it. And stories, they last in your head. If you just tell me what you did, I'm gonna be like, I don't really remember what you did, but you walk me through a really cute example with animals, or a really good example of like value prop, like, oh yeah, I want pizza. You know, like things that like will kind of linger in your head. That's gonna make so much more impact than just, I built a thing. Yeah, it's there, it's impressive. And I did a lot of really cool architecture. So proud of you. I'm very proud of you guys for building cool architecture. But if you can't sell it, there's no real point. You have to be able to sell what you're working with. So again, I think we walked through all of them. Customer example, demonstrate with impact with metrics if you can. I know that's harder, easier said than done. But if you can use any kind of metrics, data, customer info, if it's something you can even test out with other hackathon goers, even like throughout the hackathon, we talked with 10 other teams and we saw that this was the general consensus. They liked this, didn't like this, and just talk about the positives. You know, if you can get something, that's cool. It's fun. And it's good for you to understand what that process is like. So I reviewed basically some hackathon essentials, which include defining the objective, some key success metrics or the value props, and just a little bit about pitching your product or your project. And I know there's going to be a whole nother session just on pitching and some good practices, but hopefully you can take a little bit of what I said with you as you're preparing for that. I think you guys are doing videos. So definitely try to show a little bit of face. I know they're probably going to talk to you about this. It depends on your comfort level, but it makes it a lot more personal when you can talk to someone firsthand, and it keeps them engaged. So that's basically it for hackathon essentials. The rest is going to be, I don't know why the end fell off, but the rest is just going to be discussion. Yeah, I left just about half the time. I kind of ran through that. I really want to open it up to you guys. We can wait as long as you want. If anyone wants to go forth, ask a question, either pertaining to the content, my background, or random, feel free. So we got a question in the chat. So what does my day-to-day life look like as a PM? So this depends wildly on the time of year. We have seasons. So if we're in conference season, then my day-to-day life looks like working every single day, like 15 hours a day minimum, even weekends, because I'm preparing for podcasts, YouTube videos. I have a lot of like front public PR type opportunities during conference because my product is hot, it's in research. So during those times, I'm preparing a lot more. I'm also an over-preparing. So I have to create a lot of content, tutorials, examples, and I present all of those. So that's me during conference season. Me not during conference season, it's usually back-to-back strategy meetings. So I attend scrums just like an engineer does. I attend most reviews, most dev reviews, not all of them. Depends if we're talking about things that are user-facing or if they're all behind the scenes. Usually I don't care too much about how you build things unless it starts to impact the customer, in which case I care about like the different API calls, variables that you use, how users are interacting with the structure. Then I'll be involved in most of those kinds of things. Customer calls, like we talked about, at least 2 a week, usually 4, talking about their progress, blockers, and potential improvements for them. So that's day-to-day depending on the season. How did you go about, I'm gonna be reading this with you guys. So how did you go about getting a job at Microsoft? Like, did you start with the goal to get a job there, or were you looking for a job and you found yourself there? Okay, so cool story. That sounded more condescending. I didn't mean it that way, but it's a funny story. Basically, I had kind of decided, I kind of said this at the beginning a little bit, but I kind of decided I didn't want to work in industry at all because I didn't feel like I was making an impact on society or bettering anyone's life. So I decided to go into research. And then I went to Grace Hopper, mainly not for the career fair, unlike most people. I went mainly for the talks, but I did walk around the career fair for a little bit, and I only met with one company. I only met with Microsoft. I talked to a few others to ask them, like, what is a PM? Like, what is a product manager? What is a program manager? What is a project manager? I kind of wanted to understand the role because I hadn't done it, so I didn't really get it. So I asked everyone what it was, but I only talked to Microsoft. I did the first round with them. They do it there. And then I got to the second round, so I did it, and I got a PM role. So that was the only full-time job I had applied to because I had decided it wasn't for me, or so I thought. And then I interviewed with their AI org because I had done one AI project at a hackathon. And I really got along with just 2, I know this is gonna sound bad, but I got along with 2 of the 5 interviewers, like so much. Like I just felt a really deep connection. And even though that wasn't a majority, a part of me was telling me that I should do it. Part of me was like, you need to try this opportunity. And I don't regret it. Like everyone I interviewed with actually ended up being amazing. They were super fostering of my growth. And I got the opportunity to interact in a way that I didn't think was possible. So how I got there though, like basis is I want to drive home that someone once told me that you do internships not to find what you like. You do internships to find what you do not like. And that's what happened. I decided I didn't want to go to industry because of my internships, but it showed me what kinds of things I didn't enjoy, the kinds of things that weren't bringing me satisfaction in my life, that weren't helping me grow. And then I was able to focus on things that maybe would. I didn't know that they would, but maybe they would. So it's kind of like a really good process of elimination and how it helped me get there. What are some strategies or rules you follow when defining your projects and its scope? This is really good. Yeah, this is hard actually, right? So usually we work at a feature level and we're a very, very agile team. So we work based on customers. So right now, most machine learning across any country, across any company, I apologize, is actually probably bringing in negative revenue. That's shocking, right? But it's because most companies don't trust ML. They don't trust AI. So right now, if a customer wants something, we build it. So we're a little bit of a sore spot, I guess. But some strategies include, if I don't have at least 3 internal, so Microsoft, and 3 external customers who, when I build something, are going to use it. Not say they're gonna, like I know they're gonna use it because it's the only way they're gonna get through their workflows. I'm not building it. I need promise that they're gonna do it. Now, once I have it, I focus around their requirements. So what I do is I listen. I'm like, okay, so what are you trying to do? You're telling me you want this thing, but I'm not actually trying to achieve. I listen and I think, I take it back. I don't even talk with them. I take it back and I'm like, I don't think they want what they're saying. What I think they want is this piece that'll actually enable their workflow. So I spec it out. I say, okay, well, this is what it would look like. This is the functionality. These are different customers asking for the same thing without knowing that they're asking. And then I bring it back to them and I'm like, hey, look, this is what I came up with. It'll unblock you here, here, and this is why it's great. And most of the time they're like, oh yeah, sounds good. Because they don't know what they want. What they need is someone to listen to their entire workflow and decide what they want. That's a tricky part between being respectful to the customer, but also knowing that they don't always know what they want. As a PM, you ask a lot of questions, but how do you get the right questions? That's 100% experience. You know, you have to listen to senior PMs. You kind of have to, like my first customer question, I was like, oh, so what is it that you want to do? Like, oh, what do you need? And I used to one for one write down like, oh, they need X, Y, Z, elemental P. Oh, yeah. And sometimes I wouldn't even ask them like, well, how much data do you have? You know, how big is your project? Because sometimes I might be building 10 different features for a very small customer who's not going to bring a lot of revenue versus there's these huge customers with 1 or 2 asks that we should prioritize more because they're going to just bring more teams, more projects. So it's just experience. There's no such thing as a wrong question. It's just more questions, right? More questions that are going to lead to the actual answer that you want. So I think learning how to listen and not speak so much, which is hard because you guys know I talk a lot and fast, but you really have to be listening and asking clarification, like clarifying questions. Oh, you know, I have a lot of projects that I want to bring to Azure. Oh, how many? 3. Well, okay, maybe our definitions of a lot are different because I have some customers bringing 30. So, you know, like, you don't make assumptions, listen. And every time they say something, just clarify. Like, you can interrupt. It's not rude. Like, get over that thought that if you're asking clarifying questions. Interrupting, speaking over, 2 different things. So just listen to what your senior, whatever, engineers, PMs, et cetera, are doing, and try to understand the path they're trying to get to. Sorry if I'm skipping over a few of these. There's a couple, so I want to make sure I get to everyone. Do you have any tips on how to pick one project idea and focus on during a hackathon when you have multiple? Yeah, this is a really great question. So I definitely think don't get too caught up in it. There's so many hackathons, man. Like, unless even if you graduate, you can come back for hackathons for like a year after you graduate, FYI. So don't get hung up on it. I would say go for the thing that sparks the most interest with your team at the moment. So one example I can give is I went to Polyhacks in 2017, I think it was. So Polyhacks some 20 something, and I had one project that I really, really wanted. It was the only project I wanted to do for the past 3 hackathons, but I was new at the time. So like not many people wanted to go with my idea. They wanted to go with like the more senior people's ideas. And I just went around to everyone like a little kid and I was like, hey, I really want to build this. Will you build this with me? And I wanted to build an app to help adopt basically pets. It's kind of like Tinder for pets. And I was like, please, please, please build this. It's what I'm passionate about. And eventually I found the team and they were able to build it with me because they believed that I could sell it. They believed that I loved it so much and I was so into it that I would be able to sell it. So look at your projects and think about, at this hackathon, for this topic, what are we really passionate about? And if it's 2 of them, then flip a coin. There's a million other, projects that are going to come. But don't dismiss the others, right? Because as you start to look at that project, you're like, oh yeah, I want to build this. and then you write it out, you're like, this is a really big project. And the minimal viable product of this, so the most minimal version of it, is still really big. So how big is this second product? Is it the same? If it's the same, then go with the one that you're more passionate about, the one that you flipped a coin on. Otherwise, go for the one that you can realistically build. Because nothing is as dissatisfying as like going to a hackathon and then feeling like you didn't finish. It happens and you should be okay with it, but it's not a great feeling. So make sure it's something that you think you can finish, phase it. Remember we talk about just the bare minimum, even if it's ugly, even if it doesn't have a UI, even if it's just returning like numbers at you. That's your minimal feasible project, and then go ahead and phase onto that, add a little UI, add a little bit more love to it. What were the interviews for your position like? So for PM position at Microsoft, it's a mix of technical and it wasn't the, which I appreciate, it wasn't the whole design an elevator, which I was so happy about because I question the validity of those questions, even though I do talk about them when I do. Am I over time?
No, when you were explaining what the interview is like, you cut off.
Oh, okay, so I'll repeat. Thanks, let me know. So interviews for my position at Microsoft, they were thankfully not the, design a pen that you use in outer space or design an elevator. Thankfully, they weren't those types of questions because I do question the validity of those questions sometimes. But I also teach them to interviewees because that's a very typical question. So my questions were more like, you have a database that holds students. It wasn't this question exactly to the T, but it was something like, you have a database that holds student records, right? So what class they are, when they enrolled, when they're expected to graduate, create a schedule planner. So plan out their schedule for the next 5 years. So that's an example, right? So then you have to kind of sit down and say, well, what information is available to me? And I love this because that's the truth. With a lot of the work you do, you have to say, well, what do I have to work with? You said I have something, but what is that? What information is in this database? What do I know about students? Are all students going to graduate in 4 years? How many credits are each class worth? And it helps you design that along the way guide you. I much prefer that rather than just a bulk of requirements and then you build something. It should be questions that arise as you build because that's the truth. You're never going to be able to predict everything. I also got questions like a lot of these kind of scheduler like type questions, like what's a non-direct one I can give you, like schedule a calendar, like a meeting calendar. So like if I put a meeting on your calendar right now and I have a meeting that intersects by 5 minutes, should the calendar app tell me that that person is not available, or should it tell me that they're available? Should we prioritize the required people over the optional people on the email? So like different considerations that come up again as you're planning. And then I had a couple coding questions, but most of them were revolving around, they weren't super simple, but they were, and it would just ask you, I remember it was the director at the time. So he was the director of PMs. And he just asked me about 5 times, can you solve it another way? He just kept asking me that until I said, no, I can't think of any. I said, I don't think so. I think I've exhausted all my options. So he's like, okay. So literally he didn't really care which way I solved it. He just wanted to know if I would give up or how many times I would keep trying. And when you try again, what is that like? Are you just like, oh my God, but this is the only solution I knew. I don't know how else to think about it. Or did you take a deep breath? Did you say, okay, well, let's push this one to the side. It's a good solution. Is there one I can build off of this, or should I take a new approach? Decide on something and do it, execute. You have to learn how to adapt. What he was looking for is, are you nervous over a little bit of pressure? It wasn't a hard question. It's just, it had about 10 different solutions. I probably got like 8, so like it was one of those things where his goal wasn't to see if you were technical, a little bit of code, but not to see if you were technical, but how you adapt to pressure. Something to note, and I think the answer to it's not asked here, but a question that I see a lot of people asking is like, well, how technical do you have to be a PM? And I think how people answer this is really important. So if I say that you have to be really technical, then what happens is that a lot of people who would make potentially really great PMs are, and they're going to leave, and I'm going to lose potentially really great PMs. And also, if I say you have to be very technical to be a PM, what's going to happen is we're going to get very engineering focused folks who join as a PM. And we're going to get into that bubble we talked about at the beginning, where we're so focused on engineering, we're all thinking engineering excellence. How do we fix all the bugs? How do we use the best architecture? How do we make it really fast? And we're losing out on all of the customer input. We're losing out on all the competitive analysis. We're losing out on everything else that's happening and trending because we're so focused on one area. So diversity is really good. It's there's no such thing as like, oh, you need to be very technical. There are some baselines, like you need to understand how to read code at bare minimum. You're not going to be asked to write code to fix a bug, not in a typical PM role. I'm not going to say that doesn't exist, but it's not very typical. But you do need to know how to read code, understand it like on a base minimum. So definitely get into that if you haven't. And you need to understand architecture design. So just if someone were to tell you, oh, you know, here I have a database and it connects to cloud and here's like a VNet, you don't need to understand like all the intricacies because you can learn. Microsoft's all about teaching, or I'm sure everywhere you join will be about teaching you your first couple of years. But basically understand how architectures work, how do different systems, basics of maybe database systems, operating systems. If you can take those 2 classes or read a little bit about them, that'll set you up for success. You really don't need a lot more than that. But you have to, that's bare minimum. You'll be a little more technical you are because you also don't work with developers, you work with engineering managers. So PMs work with engineering managers for strategy, and then developers are down here, below them is what I mean, not down here, is below the engineering manager. And that engineering manager needs to respect and trust you. And it's trust someone who doesn't really get it, right? They'll teach you, they'll bring you up, but if you don't have that basics, it's really hard for them to trust your opinion when you say, you know, I don't think we should do that, especially to like a scientist or principal engineer. How do you tell them, you know, you think they're wrong if you don't understand some of the basics? So it's a balance there. Any more questions about your projects or clarifications or myself or you? Did I not answer anyone's question to their satisfaction? Is there a question like, yeah, you answered this, but I want more? What's my LinkedIn? I feel like I'm getting asked for my phone number. I'm so flustered. I'll put it in the chat. You made me blush, Gabby. I'll add it after. Oh, you're welcome. Anything else, folks? So I'm going to close with one. I'm going to answer questions that don't even exist. I'm going to make my own questions. One question that I got asked was like, how do you do your job with anxiety? So I have general anxiety. I kind of get like over anxious and I overthink and I over talk and I overuse my hands for things. But yet I do talks with over 100 people. I do podcasts, I do YouTube videos that I know I'm being recorded with like bright lights. We have studios at Microsoft. Like it feels like I'm being national televised. And the truth is, it's kind of like the prepared state. So if you practice in front of a mirror enough times, if you build self-confidence in the content that you're going to prepare, it's not so scary once you do it. It's pretty okay. Be careful. Do not rehearse. There's a difference between preparing, getting, because this has happened to me. If you get a script and you're like, this is exactly what I'm going to say, how I'm going to say it, like with the tone and everything. If you miss a word, if someone interrupts, if someone coughs, what's going to happen is you forget the next word and then you forget the rest of the script and you're just like, oh my God, I have no idea what I'm doing anymore. So it's much better to stutter a little bit here or like take a second to reflect and see what you're going to, then try to be perfect. Nobody's perfect. There's not a lot to gain. You're going to get anxiety and too much time anyways rehearsing the script. So I'm not a fan of per se winging it when you're at this level. You know, when you're talking to like masses, more than 100 folks, I wouldn't suggest winging it. Hackathon pitches, yeah, you can wing it. But 100, I'd say 50 people more, have the structure, at least a PowerPoint with some slides that you know ahead of time, like at least a week ahead of time with some points you want to hit home and get feedback. Pass it to your teammates, pass it to your manager, and just get some talking points on that. See a lot of folks, yeah, so anxiety is normal, it's real. Some people don't even have anxiety, they just have stage fright. Like they're perfectly fine everywhere else, but you put them on a stage and they're freaking out. Some tips that I usually give to, I mentor some folks that just joined Microsoft and they're also PMs. And I told them if they're not 100% sure how they feel about public speaking at people, we also do workshops. So that's kind of like lab at school. So basically we lead labs. We tell them like interactive, we like them and help them unblock them, and then it's like a mixture of presentation and like actual interactivity. And that's a much nicer environment because it's more like teaching. It's more like if you've done a study group, it's kind of like a study group. So it'll kind of help you ease into being the center of attention, but being able to offload it by helping an individual person while others do their own thing. Like they're not solely focused on you, they're also focused on their computers or whatever they're doing. So if you have the opportunity, lab or a workshop, target those first to build up your confidence and kind of get over that initial shock. The hand trembles will start to go away too. I still get a little shiver, but I'm not like this anymore. And the labs were a really great way to do that. You can also do that while you're at FIU. So I did some TA stuff and that helped. I did some UP speeches. Depending how old everyone is here in the chat, I probably butchered your name at one of the ceremonies for UP. So definitely done my fair share of bad presentations, but they were all experiences for where I got here. I can't really think of any more common questions that I get, skills for PM, but I don't know what you all are interested in. If you guys are interested in Microsoft, not necessarily PM Microsoft, hit me up. Like I said, I have plenty of engineer friends, research friends, PM friends in Microsoft if maybe I'm not in the role that you're interested in. I also have friends at Apple, I have friends at Google. So like if you are looking for specific, I'm not telling you they're going to give you a recommendation, but if you want to know what it's like, you know, they're more than happy to talk. Just use your alumni, use your connections. I love Seattle, Tommy. I can imagine I want to settle down here for some time. I don't know if like right now, but for some time. I can breathe actual air. It's not just humidity getting stuck into my nostrils. It's wonderful. It is lacking in the party scene, which like was kind of hard for me because I'm quite a party animal. Yeah, but I have a hike. I have a different hike that I can do for every day of the year. I can go snowboarding. How cool is that? I can go snowboarding, skiing. I don't know if this thing lets me upload pictures, but if I can, maybe I'll send a picture of a misty mountain that I went to, and it's gorgeous. And everyone is, especially at Microsoft, we have like soccer fields and fields everywhere. So they do like Sunday football, they do soccer, which I don't do because I'm not athletic, but I like to watch. We also have ginormous dog parks. So you have to get a dog. And we take my dog to the dog park and we run around. It's just so much more like relaxing. There's no pressure to be perfect. Miami is very like superficial sometimes with like keeping appearances or how you have to be. And I just feel like I could be myself here. I'm just happier. I know you mentioned a little on product management. Can you expand on it a little? I don't know much about the path. So like when you tell me to expand on it, like, do you mean, let me go back to the slide. Do you mean like more of the responsibilities? Like what I do in my job? Yeah, okay. We really focus, if you focus on that first one, development product strategy. So an example could be, let's actually go to 2 slides back. Where was it? Where's the scenario? Here. So here we're saying that traditionally AutoML targeted data scientist personas. So there was a product manager or product director that decided we're going to build a machine learning product and data scientist. That was your decision to make. Engineers did not make that decision. That was a PM. So the PM decided that's how we're going to do it. How are we going to do it? Well, what are data scientists looking for right now? What's trending? Can we pull in some data scientists and get their perspective? And we build that vision. We decide, okay, well, we definitely need to get based supervised learning. That needs to be a starting point because that's what most companies are going to want. Okay, cool. How are we going to build? Architecture are we going to use? What system design? What API calls are going to happen? How is the service going to communicate with the UX? That is developer stuff. I don't want to use we don't care. It is not our problem per se. We don't have to design that. We can give input to maybe how, if let's say we're exposing a parameter or an API to the user, definitely a PM needs to be involved with how that works. If there's any error message, deprecation warnings, PM needs to be involved to make sure that those make sense and are actually guiding the user. But as far as like how things work, we don't care. I'm going to be honest, I don't really care. Sometimes I care. Sometimes I get interested and I want to look into it, but it's not my job, if that makes sense. So what I really care about is what are my goals? So by own forecasting, what are my goals for the next 6 months? Well, I got users to scale. So the next thing I want to 50% of our current use spaces workflows. So that's going to, one, unblock 50% of our users. Can you guys hear me all right? It's saying I'm having internet connection issues.
Yeah, you
Okay.
did cut off for a bit.
Okay. Where did I stop, Gabby or Yasmin?
Literally just the last sentence you just said.
Okay, I'm such a flow with the person that I don't know. But basically it comes back to that strategy. And then once you define the strategy, things you want to work on, we do have to write specs. So these are like, yeah, no problem. Bye, Yasmin. We do have to write specs. So these are documents that detail the customer, the requirements, any user-facing things, UI mocks. So I still have to write these giant documents that go in depth into design, but it's not architectural design. And then once I'm done with the PM spec, that goes on to an engineer and they write their dev spec, which goes purely into the architecture. They don't talk too much about requirements. They don't talk about customer workflows. They don't even care like what the APIs or error messages are. They just copy and paste from a PM spec, and then they go and design it. Usually dev specs are either non-existent, a one note, or about half a page long. They're very straightforward versus a PM